There, everyone. Let's take a look at globalization and some of the positive and negatives of that phenomenon. Now, if you're wondering to yourself, what is globalization? That's a very good question. Let's define that first before we jump into it. If we look at the IMF, which is the International Monetary Fund, we can see that they defined globalization as following. First is growing interdependence between countries. So countries are depending on each other more and more and more, and networks are forming. Along with that comes cross-border transactions. Countries are doing business with each other, trading different goods and services. And the third aspect of globalization is a rapid diffusion of technology, which means that technology is finding its way into all corners of the earth. There are some good things and bad things about globalization. Let's take a quick look at some of those pros and cons. In the pro column are the good things, and we see that there are improvements in productivity, so more things are being made more efficiently. We see innovation as ideas spread around the globe, improvements are made upon them. We also see creativity, where different ideas are finding different forms in different countries, and culture is changing those ideas all the time. Some of the bad things about this is that it can destroy equality. Now, with ideas and business being global, we see that more and more of what is happening is that few people are controlling the majority of the world's wealth. And in that, they control more people as a result. And so you have a few people that are very powerful, and you have many, many, many people that have no power at all. And it can also destroy the natural world, with transnational corporations, for example, going into developing countries and taking their resources to develop these products. And then lastly, it has the potential to destroy democracy. So democracy is the right for every person to vote. Now, how can globalization destroy this? For one example, again, if we go back to the business model, is that if people are controlling, a few people are controlling more and more of the world's wealth, that means that they can also control the vote. They can become more powerful in the political process. They can afford to run for office, for example, and they can also buy votes in a corrupt society. Sadly, it happens. If we move over to our news, a cool activity that I'd like you to try is to look at the news and see how many stories there are about globalization. You can look in the newspapers, on your computer, like BBC, or you can look on CNN. And choose one story to share with the group when you come to class the next day. That would be a good place to start. Now, when we look at the dimensions or aspects of globalization, we can see that there are many different things that we have to consider. The first one we'll look at is the economic considerations. So in looking at economics, we see again that transnational corporations are becoming more and more common. We have people that are producing different goods and services, and they are shipping them to other countries. And so there's interdependence there, which was one of our key aspects of globalization. However, there is a dark side to this. If we see the mass amount of people, we see that they are not profiting from this. There are a few business owners that are profiting from globalization. So the masses in these developing countries, and even in the developed countries, are saying, get rid of TNCs. It's not fair to have such a monopoly on resources and money. Down with capitalism. And even, why am I still poor? Which is a fair question. If globalization is supposed to be so great, and these transnational corporations are supposed to be creating more jobs and more wealth, why are people still poor? Another thing that we have to look at is urbanization. We see big cities that are competing with one another in what we call global cities. So one would be like New York, for example, which has a major financial hub, lots of the entertainment capital. All these things are there. London would be another example, as well as Tokyo. So again, all these are examples of global cities. Global cities can be a great thing, but with more and more populations going to these cities, we also have problems like pollution, for example, and crime, which you might want to consider. Another aspect of globalization is social and cultural. You have goods and services coming from one country or one culture, meeting up with other goods and services from other cultures, and even religions from other cultures. So this can be great in that culture is shared between East and West, but it also comes with it some problems, some cultural misunderstandings, for example. And I'm sure you can think of examples of those. Another aspect that we have to look at is linguistic or language. In 2013, there were 1.9 billion English speakers in the world. That is a lot. And so what you find is that people that look like you and others that don't look like you are able to communicate with you. And this could be a great thing, again, for sharing of ideas and sharing of stories and culture. However, what about native languages? These languages that are spoken by only a few people, do they just die out? Do they go away? And what culture is lost with those native languages once they pass into obscurity? Look at different political organizations that exist that have different countries coming together to develop trade agreements and also decide on good governance. An example of that would be the United Nations, even the European Union, and the African Union. This last one's just a joke, I'm just kidding. But when we look at these organizations, they're coming together to talk about things like common currency, peace throughout the world, how to handle different things like terrorism and human trafficking. So all those things can be good as well. If we look at demographics, we see that people have been coming across borders for many, many years. It's increasing nowadays because of the advance in transportational technology. So with those, you're having countries that are multicultural, but you're also having population problems. So you have to deal with those as well. If we look at environmental, we see that production in one country can often lead to problems in another country because of things like pollution. For example, if we take a look at this little picture here, you see a little factory here that's creating different goods and services, but the byproduct of that production is pollution that slowly moves across national borders and into other countries. So you have to consider what is the effect on other countries, how do countries come together and deal with those problems. So as you can see, globalization is a great thing sometimes, but also has some problems with it. So well, I would like you to decide, where do you fall in this argument? Do you think it's a great thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? Is it somewhere in between? The good outweighs the bad, or the opposite? All right, thanks for watching.